So let's talk about manual mode. How's it going, everybody? I'm back again today with another video. This is a little different to the other videos I've made where I use Lightroom and Photoshop and After Effects and Premiere to make videos. This is just going to be me talking to a camera with little examples going over the top. Today we're going to be talking about manual settings. We're going to be covering ISO, aperture, shutter speed, focus and white balance. Simple as, so let's get started. Okay, before you can change any of these settings, you want to make sure your camera is actually in manual mode. Look for the little M symbol on your camera. There's usually like a little wheel on the top on Canons, or if you're using Sony, there's hidden menus and such. I'm not sure, I don't own a Sony. I'm a Canon guy. But yeah, there's a little M, and as soon as that's switched on, you're in manual mode. Okay, so we're going to start with ISO, and what does ISO mean? ISO controls the sensitivity of the sensor that's in your camera, and what that means is it creates artificial light. ISO is really useful for shooting in low light situations. However, if you use too high of a number of ISO, you get quite a noisy image. And what I mean by noisy is the fact it's very distorted, there's a lot of grain in there, and it looks a bit meh. You don't want to be using high ISO numbers. My comfortable ISO range is anything from 100 to 2,500. Anything more than that, I start losing a bit of detail. It starts getting a bit too noisy for my liking. But if you want to experiment and go a little higher than that, then that's absolutely fine. That's what it's all about. Okay, so now we spoke about ISO, we're going to talk about aperture. What's aperture? Well, aperture controls how much light is coming in through your lens and hitting your sensor. It's controlled by little blades in the lens that contract when you're at a higher number and open all the way up when they're at a lower number. And this number is called an f-stop. Usually lenses vary from having a really fast f-stop such as 1.2 and they go all the way up to 22. And I bet you're thinking, when would I use a low f-stop? Well, for instance, if you're taking a portrait, you'd want to use a lower f-stop so you can get a lot of bokeh, which is background blur. Having the aperture blades nice and wide open lets a lot more light in and you can get a much better depth of field. And a higher aperture number, you want to be shooting things like landscape, so everything in the photo, as far as your eye can see, is in focus. Simple. So let's just recap over that. ISO, a numerical value, anything from 100 all the way up to like 64,000. The higher the number, the more light. The lower the number, the less light. Aperture, the lower the number, the more light. The higher the number, the less light. Confusing, I know, but once you play around with it, you'll get it. Okay, so now we spoke about ISO and aperture, we're going to be talking about shutter speed. Shutter speed's really easy to get your head around. It's basically how long your camera shutter is open for. It's measured in seconds, so it's relatively easy to figure out. So for instance, if I've got my shutter speed open for 1 second and I go ahead and take a photo, that means whatever happens in that photo for 1 second is going to be captured. And this creates a really cool effect. You can create light trails with these kind of things, but one pro tip, always make sure your camera's on a tripod. Because if it starts moving around when you've got that shutter open, it's going to make a lot of blur and a lot of out of focus shots. It's fine if that's what you're going for, but I'd recommend using a tripod. This shot here was shot with the shutter open for 13 seconds with an f-stop of 22 and an ISO of 100. And you can see it looks pretty cool. All we did was run around the street with the iPhones and create some pretty cool wacky wavy light trails like so. On the opposing end, when would you use a high shutter speed? Preferably I'd use a high shutter speed for capturing things like sports and skateboarding, where there's a lot going on and you just want to freeze time while someone's doing something, like so. Okay, so they're the main 3 core camera settings that you need to learn and mess around with until you know what you're doing with to create amazing photos. And there's 2 more settings I haven't spoke about but I'm going to do now, and the reason is because I use these on auto mode. And I bet you're thinking, why are you dragging us in this video trying to teach us manual stuff and use auto settings yourself? Well, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is white balance. White balance is okay because the camera has a relatively good idea of detecting what's white within the frame. However, if it is a little off, I can always bring it into Lightroom and adjust it slightly to where I want it. I'll just hit the auto button and it'll automatically correct the white balance for me. Simples. And focus, well, a lot of modern day cameras use dual pixel autofocus sensors, or they have relatively good autofocusing systems. Right now the autofocus is tracking my face, so no matter where my face goes, the camera remains in focus on my face like so. But if I do want to use manual, a pro tip is to zoom in on the object you want to focus on, set that focus up a little bit, zoom back out and hit the shot, and the object you focused on should be in focus. Easy. Right, so they're the absolute basics when it comes to using manual settings. My advice now, go out, play with your camera, see what works for you. Your camera might have a better ISO sensitivity range than mine. You might be able to bump it up and get some cool shots at night, or you can just lower your f-stop and let more light in and get some cool, nice bokeh portraits. Or you can go out, get some nice landscapes, shoot some long exposures, capture some sports, play around. You might even like using manual white balance and focus, but for me, I leave those on auto. Just works for me. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, guys, and I hope you learned a thing or two. As usual, if you have, leave us a comment and a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe for weekly videos. I hope you enjoyed today's video and I'm sure I'll see you again in the next one. Adios.